Thanks for staying with us. Last week, we brought you the story of the human rights report into the water issues plaguing KwaZulu-Natal. Now, SALGA says the report indicates that there's a need for urgent reforms in the water sector to prevent a crisis. The organization says while the Human Rights Commission acknowledges the strides that have been made by municipalities to ensure access to tap water, it does paint a dim picture in parts of the province. Let's discuss this further now. We're joined by SALGA KZN Chairperson, Cllr Thami Ntuli. Thank you so much for your time this evening. The report says parts of the province do not have water. It also notes that in some of these municipalities, their responses to complaints is inadequate and they cannot provide appropriate and sustainable redress to the affected communities. So how do you ensure, SALGA, that municipalities respond correctly to the communities affected?
Well, good evening to yourself and to the viewers, and thank you for having me. Well, it's quite very complex. However, as SALGA, we had a session with municipalities where we were looking at the issue of collaboration between the different departments, because the problem is much more bigger since the stakeholders which are responsible for the service, they are working in silos. I'm talking about the issue of the Department of Water and Sanitation, the water boards and the municipalities. You'll find that some of the problems they are exacerbated by the fact that the tariffs which the water boards are charging municipalities are quite very high. For an example, Umgeni alone in the previous financial year, they made a profit of 1.2 billion. Whereas when you look at the municipalities, they are supplying water to communities where the indigenous register is increasing time by time. And the other problem being the issue of the current load shedding, which compels municipalities to use diesel, which is quite very expensive. But the SALGA, when we talk about the restructuring, we are saying, in fact, these three important stakeholders need not to work in silos. There should be some kind of understanding what effect the decisions for a particular level of this hierarchy has on another level. As I mentioned, the issue of municipalities who are faced with this problem of people who are not having a capacity to pay for water.
So how do you bring them to the table? Because as you say that everyone is operating in their own little spheres. So how then do you begin as SALGA to make sure that everybody is at the table to be able to have some of these conversations that could see this issue being addressed?
It would be not for the first time to do so. We had some engagements in the province where all the relevant stakeholders were together, and we intended to continue as such because the Human Rights Commission, in fact, it compels that something urgent must be done by us as SALGA, so that we come together with all the relevant stakeholders to look at the issues. But the issues, as I've said, that they are quite complex, because the other thing with SALGA we cited before even the Human Rights Commission was the issue of the aging infrastructure that requires monetary input. So not only the human capital, so that we repair and maintain the infrastructure, not in fact ignoring the reality that the backlog is as such that there are places where there are gray areas where there's not even a tap or a single pipe of water, where people are reliant on the rivers and even supply through the water tankers, which is not the best way of supplying water. We need sufficient money so that municipalities will be able to address these issues which were raised by a Human Rights Commission. And we also need to emphasize the issue of professionalization and depolitization of local government, because the issue of cadre deployment, it cause municipalities to have employees who are not fit for the purpose, apart from the fact that it's not easy for the municipalities to attract highly qualified engineers due to the salary scales as regulated by a KZN, which in fact deprives municipalities to also attract the highly skilled engineers.
So there's also, of course, that issue, as you say, more money is required. One then even says that it's important for that money to also be used for the purpose that it's intended for. But also the report last week when we were, perusing through it, there's also concerns around the quality of water in some of these areas. You think about Section 27 of the Constitution, for example, providing for everyone to have access to sufficient food and water. And this is a basic need. It's a right that people have. So what happens then in those areas where the quality is also under question?
That is what one is saying. As SALGA, we need to, in fact, interact with the municipalities so as to encourage them to really ensure that reports are served to the relevant committees and are analyzed, and councillors are empowered so to understand that whenever what level is not the good level of water. And again, the issue of depoliticizing local government will ensure that the people who are hired are people who are really fit for the job, who will understand their job, will do very well, because it talks to the issue of also accountability, that the people who are employed there, are they accountable enough to those who are playing the oversight role, understand exactly as to what is it that is presented to them when it comes to the monthly reports which are made to the ESCO about the quality of water which are actually supplied to the communities.
And that quality is of grave concern. And as you say, that these conversations need to be had, because these stakeholders should not be working in silos. But let's see what happens then at the back of this particular report, whether it gathers dust or something is in fact done. That was the SALGA KZN Chairperson, Cllr Thami Ntuli, shedding light on the current water issues.